Welcome to Witch Hunt, the show bringing you news of the ongoing crisis of modern witch hunts, formerly known as harmful practices related to accusations of witchcraft and ritual attacks. I'm Josh Hutchinson.
And I'm Sarah Jack. Today we have a truly inspiring guest who is making a significant impact in the fight against stigma and cultural misconceptions about dementia in Namibia.
Our guest today is Berrie Holtzhausen, the founder of Alzheimer's Dementia Namibia. Berrie's journey from pastor to dementia advocate is nothing short of remarkable. He's dedicating his life to educating communities and providing compassionate care for those living with dementia, which is often misinterpreted as witchcraft.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today.
Good afternoon. My name is Berrie Holtzhausen. When I turned 57, my wife and I always, when it's our birthday, we like to go to some place in Namibia, to a lot, somewhere in nature. And we love our wildlife resorts called Etosha, but it was fully booked. And one of my school friends opened up a lot on the Kuneni River. That is now right on the west, where we are sitting now, also between Angola and Namibia, at Ipupa Falls. You will see on your little map, there's a writing Ipupa Falls. And I found him and I said, yeah, I've got a place for you. Please come and visit me. It was in October 2012. And the Sunday morning, he asked me, Berrie, were you ever in a Himba village? Now, the Himbas are one of the most traditional tribes in sub-Saharan Africa still. And I said to him, no, never in my life. And he said, let me take you to one. And then we traveled 20 kilometers south, and he took me to the king, what we call the Formani, the headman, the king of this tribe. And he walked me through this village, explained to me every hut and why are the cattle and the goats being kept in the middle of the village to be protected from wildlife earlier years, but now from stealing it or whatever. And then while we were walking through it, like I explained also in my documentary. So, by the way, Sarah, we won an award in Colorado for the document in 2018. But there was an old lady just popped out her head out of the hut. But the hut was very small. She couldn't stand up straight in the hut. She was sitting down and just popped out her head, and she was shouting and crying out. And I asked him, now, is this another wife of the headman? Normally they've got 2 or 3 or 4 wives. He said to me, no, she's a witch. I said to him, what do you mean she's a witch? No, she's dangerous. She killed people through magical powers and killed the cattle and harmed the crops and stuff like that. I said to him, a witch? She's a witch. He said, I can't believe this. But in any case, he said, yeah, in our culture, we will say she's mad. I said, okay. And after that, I couldn't focus anymore on what he's explaining to me. When we entered the circle through the village, I said to him, listen here, Koos, I'm working with people living with dementia, not for long now, but for the last 2 or 3 years. And tell me more about that. And he said, no, okay, I'll introduce you to the headman's wives and they can tell you more. And I said, but ask them, I want to meet her. I said, oh, she's dangerous. Well, what do you mean she's dangerous? No, that she can kill you in a split second or whatever. I said, no, I'm not afraid. I really want to see her. And then they sent someone with me, a translator. And while we were walking down to ask him, why do you call you a witch? She kills people, she destroys crops and uses magical powers. And she's very dangerous. And therefore she's chained with physical chains among the legs and from her legs to the pole of the hut. And I said to him, but please translate to me what she is saying. And then I noticed that she's living with dementia. Because she was, like they will say, no, she's just talking nonsense. I can't translate what she's saying. She's talking nonsense, confusingly talking about huts and cattle and other people's names and who's already long gone. And that is also for us a sign that she can speak to dead people. So she must be a witch. And said, but ask her what is her name. And the only words she could say that he could translate to me is, what is your name? I asked, what is your name in a language? And she said to me back, what is your name? My name is, what is your name? And then I could see, but she's extremely hungry and extremely thirsty. And in the hut was nothing. There was normally they use the skin of a cattle as a type of blanket or something to sleep on. There was nothing inside. Not a blanket, only this dirty cloth around, and I could see collarbones sticking out. And so I gave her a little bit of water, and I could see that she's also very thirsty. And yeah, and then we left, and then I asked my translator, but tell me more about her. Why is she dangerous, and why do you chain her, and so on. And then I said to my friend Koos, I can't go home. I can't go home because I want to unchain this witch, the so-called witch. And I like to care for her because, to my knowledge, I'm not a medical professional, but it might be some brain challenge she's having, maybe a stroke or something else. I don't know. And I asked him, how long is she now chained here? He said 20 years. What? 20 years sitting in that hut in chains? I can't believe this. And I said to him, listen, yeah, I can't go. This 900 kilometers from my house. I can't go home and leave her like this. I need to talk to the king. He said, but the king is not now here. I'll phone you when he's back. He's somewhere in meetings, somewhere in the country. And 3 weeks later, he phoned me, and then I went back. And that's when we start discussing and to unchain her, to let her be free again. But very interesting that this king asked me 3 questions. The first question he asked me, are you from the government? And someone before told me he's anti the government that is in power. And then I said, no, I'm not from the government, which was of course true. And then he asked me, are you from the church? And I was still a pastor. And I think if the first question's answer need to be no, this one also need to be no. Now I'm going to lie. And I said, no. He said, oh, okay, yeah, because there were people from the church before 3 years ago, and they said, no, she's possessed by demons. So we can unpossess her, and so-called unpossessed her, and said, okay, now you can unchain her, and then I left. But let me just fill in this part. He told me that many moons ago, when this started happening, he took her over the river to Angola. Always in Africa, people believe the strongest witch doctors are in the next country. They're not my country, they're in the next, and the next country believe they're here. So he went to a witch doctor, and the witch doctor said this to him. Listen here, you need to take care of her, because if she dies, you will follow 3 days later. So when he unchained her that day, she disappeared into the veld, into the bush. And they start searching for her, and they found her 3 days later under a bush, nearly dead, totally dehydrated and stuff like that. And he was so afraid, you can imagine. The witch doctor said to him, if she dies, you will die 3 days later. And now they found her, luckily, 3 days and before she died. And then he said, okay, it's finished. No one is going to unchain her anymore. So that's why he asked me, are you from the church? And luckily I said no. And then his third question was, I'm not a doctor. And then he said, but then are you a witch doctor? I said, no, I'm not a witch doctor. I don't even know one. But how are you going to care for it? If you don't use medication, witchcraft, something. I said, I will care for her by unchaining her and then with love. What? I said, with love. I'll train people from this area, and we will put up a village for her. But she can't sit in that chain. That is totally inhuman. And then he said, okay, I will give you a chance. And we asked my friend to connect me with some of the local people, young ladies, in order that I can take them down to the farm where we do the caring for people with dementia. At that time, only white people, white Africans, German speaking, English speaking, Afrikaans speaking like me. But just before I arrived with them, we admitted an old Herero lady who was a professor at the University of Namibia and Cape Town. She spoke all the languages of our country, which is about 13 or 14 fluently. And she contracted FTD, frontal temporal dementia. but still, even educated for her, people see white people say mad, but she's a witch. And when I brought these young ladies into our place for them, our white people, dementia was only a disease for white people, like HIV/AIDS always was long before. Till Nelson Mandela opened up the knowledge in Africa for HIV/AIDS. And when they saw this lady from their own culture, the Hereros is part of the Yimba. The Yimba are the older part, and the Hereros are the more westernized part, speaking the same language, having the same culture, and so on. So when they saw her, they said, but she's the same as the other people. And according to our culture, this is a witch. And so I trained them for I use my cell phone because they can't, most of them can't even read or write because they don't go to school, but they can use a cell phone. And they understand the different apps of the cell phone. And I explain normally to people, I use my cell phone till today to explain the different apps is like the different brain cells and lobes in my brain. If you delete one of them, for instance, if you delete the gallery, you can't take pictures anymore. You can't meet people anymore and remember them. And so they, I think it was about 2 months or so, then I took them back. And my friend put up a army tent outside the village because I was not allowed anymore to go into the village. And then we start with her caring. And that was on the 12th of the 12th, 2012. 12th of December. And for the first time, I heard her name. I asked people because everyone would just say, it's the mad lady, it's the witch, without a name. I said to someone, because they came from all over to see what this white man is going to do today, and in their context, she's going to kill me. And I asked one of the people. He said, "No, I'm a nephew, but he's also a trained teacher, so well educated." I said, "But just tell me what is her name before I unchain." He didn't mention her name. He just went down on his knees in the sand, wrote the name Ndjinaa. I said, "But why don't you pronounce it?" No. And then then of course we unchained it. We put up the tent for her, and I slept that night in my truck outside to see that everything is well with her. And so this is how we started among rural Namibia.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Witch Hunt.
Join us on YouTube.
Have a great today and a beautiful tomorrow.